Wait, I need to be able to see, darn it. Hello, my name's Sophie. I love creating things with my hands, and I'm excited to be doing some videos here at the Northeast Georgia History Center, showcasing a few Japanese textiles techniques. I'm not an expert on any of them, so the idea is that we're learning together, and you can see what kinds of things you can create with not too much experience. And I'm future Sophie. It's been a little while since we did our filming, so I'll be dropping in periodically with some extra things I have learned. Enjoy the video. Today's technique is called Shibori, and it's a resist dyeing technique where you twist and you bind your fabric. That means that when you put the dye on it, some parts of it stay white. So that's where the word resist comes in. The fabric is resisting the dye. Fabric tying techniques exist all around the world, but I'll be focusing on the versions practiced in Japan. Shibori is a Japanese word that means to twist or to wring. Some methods are similar to tie-dye, which you all might or are most definitely familiar with. I've tie-dyed only once in my life because I never went to summer camp, because I have this nervous energy that makes it hard for me to go to summer camp. And I don't really like the way that tie-dye looks. To me, it's a little bit too colorful, but seeing the versatility of Shibori has kind of inspired me to not write off the whole technique as, as a thing. So now I'm kind of more interested in resist dyeing. So in Japan, Shibori has existed for over 1,000 years. Shibori is incredibly refined, and it's used to produce some truly stunning garments. The iconic color that we're using today is indigo, a lovely blue derived from fermenting the leaves of the indigo plant. Today's Shibori will be a mixture of authentic and accessible. So I want you to know the history behind the Shibori, and I want you to know how complex it can be, but I also want you to have fun. Let's look at the things that we're going to need for our Shibori. White fabric from a natural fiber. This will be cotton, hemp, linen, silk, etc. Those are the main ones that come off the top of my head. What I did to get my white fabric was I went through my t-shirt drawer, because t-shirts are classic. Everyone has t-shirts. And I'm sure you have like a white t-shirt that you don't really care about, but it's not torn up enough to get rid of. So this will be a great project that you can use it on. I also went to the thrift store. So if you shop like the color or the discount of the day, or you go on like 99-cent day, you can get, 5 good shirts to dye with for like $5. Bedding is also great. So I got a bunch of pillowcases for like 69 cents each. And pillowcases are perfect because they're just big rectangles. Like, you can't mess up folding a rectangle. I mean, maybe you can, I did. So, things like skirts, hats, scarves, jackets, really just anything. You're going to also need gloves. I have some green gloves that I call my Aquaman gloves. Gloves are to protect your hands from the dye, the color, and from the heat, because the dye is going to be hot. So following that, we're going to need a bucket for your dye. If you have tie-dyed, then you would know you use it with like the little squeeze bottles, but Shibori is not done that way. It is done in a dye bath. So in order to be beginner friendly, I am using, this is the wrong one. I am using Rit liquid dye. So the color that I'm using is indigo. It's called indigo. And since this is not a natural dye, it doesn't actually have indigo in it. It's just called that. But you can dye, I think like I said before, you can dye in any color or any shade of blue. All of the pieces that I'm going to show you guys today, I used the indigo for. Oh, that's right. And make sure that your dye is for natural fibers. This right here says cotton, wool, nylon, and more. Rit also makes a synthetic dye, so just make sure that you're not getting your synthetic dye. I also have the fixative. I've never tried the fixative before, but since I'm doing this big fancy Shibori project, I wanted to give it a try, so I'll talk a little bit about that later. And that's another bucket that you'll need for your fixative. So if you're doing the Rit with the Rit dye and the fixative, you'll need 2 buckets. The last thing you're going to need is your binding items. And this is where Shibori is fun, and it's a little bit different than tie-dye. So I'm using rubber bands. You can tell that I dyed with these because they're blue. Rubber bands, twine. I keep calling it twine, but that's string. This is twine. Wooden blocks or blocks. I also have these acrylic sheets that I thought that the wooden ones would be better because they're like more authentic, but I ended up liking the acrylic sheets the most. I think the thing about the acrylic was that it was rigid, and then you're going to need, for another method, you can use, we have some buttons right here. So you're gonna want like some small objects. For the ones I did at home, I used some like aquarium rocks, or you can just use good old-fashioned rocks. And then the other thing that we have is a pole. This was the one that I knew I had to show you guys because, come on, it's so exciting. It's a pole. Like, what are we gonna do with the pole? Oh, that's right. And the other thing is that Rit, I'm not trying to be like the Rit spokesperson, but I wanna have it be known that it's out there. Rit makes a Shibori starter kit. It was $14, but I used a coupon, I got it for 10. And I wanted to get it to try out for the video. I wasn't sure how helpful it would be, and it really was quite helpful. So it comes with gloves. These acrylic sheets came from here. Some twine, rubber bands. It comes with the dye and the fixative, and then it has a little pamphlet, and the pamphlet has like some basic techniques. Some of them I'm gonna show you. Some of them were a little bit like, I think they just made them up. But anyway, it was really helpful, and it kind of cleared my mind because that was a thing. I'm very impatient as a crafter, and having like a pamphlet or written instructions just really helped me be like, okay, next step, next step, next step. So now let's look at the ways that you can bind your fabric. This is very time consuming, so make it fun for yourself and be creative. Like I said before, I'm an impatient crafter and I messed up quite a few times for something so simple, and that's because I wasn't taking my time. And that's gonna be kind of the theme with these textile videos, is that it's something you should take your time with. You could almost say it's meditative. Just be chill. Also remember that you can't control everything. So don't get super attached to like an idea of how you want something to come out. It might not come out just like that, and it'll still look great, it'll still be pretty. Just enjoy your process. First you're going to wet your fabric. I'm not going to do that here, but just pretend that it's wet. And since your fabric is going to be wet, this is a great thing for you to do outside. So I just spread out a towel on my back patio, and I sat in the horrible sun. So this part about binding your fabric, you're gonna wanna get all of this out of the way before you ready your dye bath. And I would say this took me at least an hour. So make it an afternoon, have a good time with it. So our first technique that I'm going to show you is called Itajime. This one is the simplest one, and this is where I was kind of being like, oh, it's so simple. It's probably like the worst one. But this one was my favorite. I got my best results with it, and it's also the easiest one for you to like mentally comprehend. And you're going to start by accordion folding your fabric. This next part was me struggling to explain the accordion fold, so I made some extra footage of me doing it on a pillowcase. I started by folding it long ways, and then you just make a series of alternating folds so that it's like a paper fan. So there it is from the side. And then you can just do the exact same thing from the front, and you'll get like a little packet of fabric. And what you want is all of those folds. My next step after making my little fabric packet is to secure it with some rubber bands. I'm doing this just to make sure it doesn't unravel once I put it in the dye. Then after that, I'm going to take my rigid objects. For me, this is the acrylic sheets, and just make a little sandwich, and then go ahead and secure that too with the rubber bands. And if your rubber bands are digging into your fabric, don't worry about that. It will only enhance your design. So that, oh, that's right. And you can also do this by folding it into triangles. So after you accordion fold, you can fold it into triangles. Like I said, I'm very bad at folding geometric shapes. So I kind of struggled with that one, but the square is like as simple as it gets, and you get a really pretty result. And since through the magic of television, this isn't TV, through the magic of video, I can show you my results. So this right here is a pillowcase that I did. And you can see the little square shape. You might notice in the footage that the pillowcase is a very light blue, so that prompted me to try dyeing it again. So this is my second attempt, same technique. I noticed that this time I got a lot of what I'm gonna call spidering. So the dye traveled in a more of a webbed pattern, which is not what I expected at all, but is actually pretty cool. I also got a gradient, so it's very dark up here, and then as it goes towards the bottom, it's lighter, and that's because of how the dye was distributed, because of how it's folded. So just thought I would show you guys what happened when I dyed it again. And here's a shirt that I dyed with that same technique. Sorry, my head doesn't fit in the shot. That's just how it's gonna be. So this one is from the original batch. I didn't re-dye it. And you can actually see that there's a good bit of white and there's none of that spider webbing that I mentioned before. I really like how this shirt came out. It looks very, very random, very organic to me. And of course, these little areas right here are where the dye permeated, and these are the places where the dye did not. The square pattern isn't super apparent, but that doesn't bother me at all. I just think it looks super cool. And I think that's kind of what I like about the Shibori, is that it can be geometric, but it's also organic. So it has like a flow to it, and you can tell that there was water involved, but it kind of has some structure to it too. So that is the Itajime technique. Next technique is called Arashi, and that means storm. And this is the one where we use the pole. First up is the pole. I am using a PVC pipe that I just had lying around my house, and in the other footage we're using a broom handle. The width of your pole is going to affect your design, but not enough that I would say you need to find a specific sized pole. I would recommend though going for a shorter one or cutting a longer one you have if you can, just because you need to wrap your fabric and then tie it, and if you have something really long and unwieldy, that can be a pain. So the basic concept behind this one is that you wrap a piece of fabric around your pole, secure it at both ends, and then scrunch it together. So I actually tried this a couple times, and I found that this is one that needs a lot of prep and really making sure that you get the tying part right. Just because if you don't scrunch it enough, you won't really get a cool design. So this piece of fabric right here, I accordion folded it first, and then I have scrunched it, and you can see all of those lovely wrinkles on there. I did this one a couple times. The first time I didn't accordion fold, and I got something pretty decent. And then I tried another time really lazily scrunching it together, and it did not come out very good. For more authentic examples, I've seen very thin fabric used and very meticulously pleated around the pole, which gives you a really beautiful look. It's supposed to look like a rainstorm, like when the wind is really strong and is pushing the rain sideways. But yeah, basically after you have it up here, you just scrunch it and tie it. So despite trying this technique a couple times, I was not 100% happy with what I got, but I will show you guys my successes and my failures because that is part of the learning process. So first off, we have this one, which is sadly a complete dud. This is from the batch that I did really haphazardly, so I didn't scrunch it enough and it didn't give me the designs that I wanted. It still does look cool though, so I have a shirt that I can wear around the house. This one did also not come out completely as intended, but I peeked at the corner of the front of the shirt and I realized that I kind of did get those designs right there. So that's pretty cool to see. Even though I didn't get the whole shirt like I wanted, I had a minor success right here, which is quite nice. And the shirt that I'm wearing right now is my most successful attempt. So this one came out a lighter color, and right down the middle I have this really lovely, I call it like a quiet water. So it's not quite as intensely striped as the more traditional examples, but you can kind of see where I had the beginnings of the technique. So you might want to think of this technique as more of a challenging one to really spend your time on and see just how nicely you can get those stripes in. This one is quite easy, so all you do is you take your small object. I'm using the aquarium rocks from earlier and some rubber bands. I'm using these really small rubber bands. I found them in the section for, I think they were for weaving on a tiny loom. I wouldn't know, I don't own a tiny loom, but. And all you do is you put it in your fabric, and then you wrap your rubber band around the fabric. So you end up with these little bulges. And what happens is your dye touches all of these areas, but the part where it's scrunched up and where the rubber bands are, that part gets left white. So with this one, you can really do whatever you want. You can group it, you can just do spots all over. It's really up to you. Of course, it's easy and fun to wrap the little stones, but taking them out can take some time, so keep that in mind. And here are my results. So as you recall, I placed my stones randomly, and that gave me a very random sort of polka dotted look. There are some places where I bunched up a couple stones into one area to get a larger ring, but overall I used the same size stones. However, using varied sizes is an option. So if you were to combine big stones, small stones, you know, whatever you wanted, you could get a lot of variety in your design. This shirt that I'm wearing is another example. I used fewer stones in this one, so it has fewer circles. And of course, recall that the white ring is what's left by where the rubber band was, and then the blue circle is where the stone was. As for historical examples of this technique, there are tons. I'm going to put one up on the screen. They are incredibly intricate, very beautiful. So if you like the results that you've gotten from doing this on a t-shirt, this is totally something you can play with and do more of. Like, the sky's the limit. All right, so we've got one more technique, and this one is the one that's most similar to tie-dye. Like I said, this last one produces a result very similar to tie-dye, and it's because you're twisting your fabric. So I find it best to secure a little section right here, probably with a small rubber band. If you have a smaller piece of fabric though, try not to make this little section too big, because it will become one circle once you're done dyeing. One project I did, I made this section like really big, and then when I unraveled my project, there was just a huge circle in the middle, which was not what I wanted. So once you have one part secured, then one thing you can do is you can honestly just twist it, and then you can tie it up. I like to use the string for that, or you could do the whole thing on a stick. And the stick just gives you something to twirl it around, kind of a bit of guidance. I have a really thin bamboo skewer here. I would recommend something a little bit thicker, like a dowel. But that is basically what you do, and then you would go ahead and tie that as well with the string. So whichever one you pick, that is basically how we do this technique. Of course, we are being beginner friendly here, so this is very simple. But if you like this look and are interested in a more traditional historical version, there is a technique called kumo, which is created with very meticulously bound pleats. And there's so many of them that they kind of look like fingers all over the fabric. And it's supposed to create a design that looks like a spider web. So definitely look into that if you like how this technique looks and you would like to see a more advanced version. And here are my results. So this first shirt, I did one big twist. You can see right here is where I secured it in the center, and there's sort of a circle where that happened. And then do you see these little fine white lines? Those are from the string that I wrapped it with. So this does give you that similar tie-dye look where you have the big swirl. But I like it very much, especially since it's all in blue. I think that kind of adds something interesting to it. This is the technique with one big swirl, but I also tried it with a bunch of little ones. And this ended up looking a lot like the technique that we just did with the rocks. But if you look closely, you can see that there are lines from where the strings were. So now let's talk about the actual dyeing process. So you have had a wonderful time on your patio. You have bound countless bundles of fabric. Actually, I wouldn't suggest doing like 20 bundles of fabric unless you have a huge family. I tried to do a ton and it actually just stressed me out. And I think that's the reason I messed up on some things. Okay, so you have all of your fabric ready. So now it's time for you to get your dye bath ready. And I would say follow the instructions on whatever dye it is that you're using. I did this project about 4 different times, and I let it soak from 10 to 20 minutes. And the 20-minute soak was what gave me the deeper color, like this one, which I would say is like a proper indigo. And I like this one the most because I think I look really good in dark blue, and that's what matters to me. You're going to take your fabric and you're going to drop it into the dye bath, all bound up and ready. And you can just kind of stir it around, keep it fresh, keep it going. You'll have some parts that'll kind of like go up to the top. So just make sure that those stay dunked in. If you have the pole and the pole does not fit, you can just balance it on top of your bucket and scoop. Okay, so after your 10 to 20 minute soak, it's time for soak number 2. And this is if you're using the dye fixative. So you're going to take your fabric, still in the bindings. Don't unbind it. Don't get excited and be like, oh, I wonder what it looks like. No, keep it still bound. That was one of my mistakes. Keep it still bound, and you're gonna put it in the fixative for 20 minutes. And then you can take it out. And then you can unbind it. And you can go ahead and rinse it off in cold water until the water runs clear. And now it's time for the drying. And this is where I messed up a lot. So, like I said, I had done a couple baths where I was like hustling, and I was like, we gotta finish this. I've got 20 t-shirts, I'm gonna dye them all at once. And the problem with that is that by the time the dye came out of the bath, I was exhausted. So what I did is I just threw it in the dryer. And do not do that, because the dryer is hot and the dye is heat activated. So what it did is it took all of my beautiful whites and it tinted them blue. It didn't ruin it, but to me it ruined. This one is from the batch that I did not ruin. And you can see that it has some true whites in it. And this one is from a batch that I did mess up on. And you can see where all of this is just kind of light blue, where it would be really stunning if it was white. So just keep that in mind. I think the best way to dry is air dry. So like if you have a clothesline, I sadly do not. So I just put my stuff out in the sun and let it sit there. Go out every now and then, I just flip it over. But if you must use the dryer, use it on low heat. Don't just stick it in the hot dryer, because that will mess up your project. And if you're me, you'll be mad about it for 2 days. So that's pretty much it. That's our little walkthrough of a beginner Shibori project. I tried this several times and there's still so much to learn. Like I said, I kept messing up, but the stuff that I got still looks pretty cool. Other methods that you can try, even if you just want to see really beautiful Shibori, head to Google and just Google Shibori and you will see some beautiful stuff. Traditional things to even just, things people are making now. I think it's a really cool technique, really cool medium. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, I'm Sophie, and if you'd enjoyed this program, please be sure to subscribe to the Northeast Georgia History Center's YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram.